We live in an exciting time where we're always adding cutting-edge features and technology to other pieces of technology, and that's becoming increasingly common, especially for early adopters. VR is giving the early adopters idea a whirl with the Oculus Rift. Sony has its PlayStation VR, Microsoft has the HoloLens, Valve and HTC have the Vive. I don't know how to say it. The idea of VR has gotten so big, Nintendo is the only major gaming company being the exception at this point, who haven't released a virtual reality prototype of any kind. I take it the Virtual Boy stung pretty hard, and those wounds haven't healed yet. That all being said, I'm not here to talk about virtual reality. Instead, I'll be talking about smartphones. I know, that's a bit of a leap, and the alarming rate of new features being added to these things. I'm all for development of ideas, but frankly these features feel more like smartphone SnakeOil more than anything else. It seems every new phone needs some gimmick feature to make it stand out from the competition. It also seems I'll be making videos formatted into lists for the next few weeks. Oh boy. Can you see where this is going? Let's talk about it. Before I begin slandering off of these companies I'm about to mention, I'm not against development in technology, I'm all for it. It can't be the year 2016 forever, but I do think that before you release these features, actually find out if the audience wants the feature in the first place. There's no point releasing it other than for bragging rights, which neatly brings me to the first point. I think someone at Sony didn't get the memo about over-ambitious features in the morning news blast, because this is a thing that exists, and it's some serious overkill. The Z5 is the phone in question, it's on the screen right now, and is notable for being the first ever 4K smartphone. That's great and all, but there is one question. Why? Why does this need to exist? I can almost guarantee there is no developer in the world who would make an app to run at a display resolution of 3840 by 2160 on a 5.5 inch display. Yeah, it's tiny. 5.5 inches or 5.5 inches from now on is what I consider the biggest a phone can ever be before being deemed a phablet. Sony just hasn't realised that a big resolution on a small display will not give a better result. Yes, the image will be sharper, but so is a retina display, as is a 1080p phone like the Samsung Galaxy S6. 4K works for big displays because it's a big resolution in the first place. 4 times the size of 1080p. It's in the name. 5.5 inches is not the same as having a 27-inch smartphone. It just isn't the same. And the fact that 27-inch smartphones could never exist. They're just too big for that. To give a real world example, I have a 5-inch phone which can fit in my hand pretty decently, and it has a resolution of 720p, that's 1280 by 720 for those keeping score at home. And while I'll admit 720p is not optimal for a smartphone experience, that accolade goes to 1080p, 1920 by 1080, again for those keeping score, 720p looks perfectly fine. In fact, I'd go so far as to suggest to never buy a smartphone phablet or a 7-inch tablet without seeing a resolution of 720p or higher, and here's why. A lot of cheap tablets online have an interesting resolution of 1024 by 600. 600p if you will. This makes a lot of things on screen very fuzzy when you blow them up, irrespective of any reasonable screen size or pixel density. That's why I'd always recommend someone get a 7-inch tablet with 720p over a 4K 5.5-inch smartphone, because there's no point to it. You see, Sony, screen size is just as important as its resolution. That was the point I was getting at, and yes, I'm aware some of you are going to say, but upscaling is a thing. And that's true, the Z5 does upscale apps that are not native to 4K, and that's fantastic. But that means all the apps you've ever had will need to be upscaled to take advantage of the 4K display if they don't already, which in turn takes up precious resources from the processor, and obviously not giving you an optimal experience now, is it? Speaking of the processor, some people are power users when it comes to their own smart devices. Those people have 10 Google Chrome tabs, a game of Jetpack Joyride and Twitter running, Skype in the background, have Monument Valley open, as well as Steam, Podcast Addict and Sonic CD all running too. And that's fine. However, and this might shock a lot of the big companies, not many people care what's under the smartphone's hood. They just want something that is advertised as being fast, responsive, and a generally good phone when it's reviewed. I just gave you the reason why Apple still sells its iPhones and iPads and Apple Watches to the general consumer. A, because they're a luxury brand, and B, because they're pretty decent phones, and C, well, they look good. You just can't deny that. They fit the criteria I just listed, basically. 8 cores on a smartphone is impressive, but what does it do that a quad-core processor can't? Having extra cores does not necessarily mean a better performance, contrary to popular belief. It just means it can do more stuff at the same time. The AMD X4 860K, while an incredibly good value processor for the PC market, the dual-core simply cannot beat the Intel Pentium Anniversary Edition in terms of raw performance on the PC, and that has 2 cores instead of 4. As you can probably guess, I don't have a quad-core smartphone, and the footage I've just shown you is doable on 4 cores. Hell, octa-core processors haven't even really begun to affect the PC market to the majority of consumers yet, with the AMD FX series being the only exception, and even then, only if you're using those cores for high maintenance tasks like video editing or 3D modeling. My advice, save money and get the quad-core variant of a phone with similar specs. You just don't need that much power. The HTC Desire 616 may seem desirable, but a quad-core smartphone is just as good, and that's not counting the power consumption of the sodding things, which is a huge factor for a lot of people. I'm all for better cameras. They're a part of our culture now, like it or not, but 28 megapixels seems a little too excessive, and I'm a photography nut as it is. Like with my 720p is fine argument earlier, a 10 megapixel camera on the back and a 5 megapixel camera up front will do you good. Also, and I can't believe people don't understand this by now, more megapixels does not equal a better camera. MP, or megapixels, which is what you see on the advertising, is just how many colours there are in a camera's sensor, the bit that takes the photo. And yes, in certain situations, like at a party or outside at the Chelsea Garden show, more megapixels do make a difference, but most of the time, it really doesn't. As much as I'm moaning about this, most manufacturers like Sony, Samsung and HTC do generally give the option of taking photos and videos at the phone's native resolution, even if it is 4K, to stop blurring and oversaturation of colours from happening. Okay, what's next? I'm not even gonna speak. Just watch.
So you guys ready?
Yeah, we've been working on this for days, and I think we have a couple things that might work.
Adam tries licking the latex.
Hey!
And he's in.
I don't care about the alarm, it works, man! No way!
That is latex glued to my thumb.
Next up, it's Jamie, who's made a regular ballistics gel print of Grant's thumb. And guess what?
Yay!
Hey! Nicely done! That's 2 for 2!
No way!
Well, I say we move on to the copy paper now.
With everything they do working, the team goes for broke by trying the photocopy of Grant's print. No warmth and no pulse, just a licked piece of paper.
This is dumb! What is this? Well, there's your problem.
Oh no!
So the myth that fingerprint locks can't be foiled is busted.
Are you convinced that fingerprint technology is safe now? Because that was recorded 10 years ago, and the technology has not changed. Next. A lot of people, myself included, look for this when buying a smartphone or a tablet. This section does apply more to tablets as they don't always have the latest OS installed, but here is my advice. Buy a phone installed with KitKat or higher. No, really, KitKat is perfectly fine, even on modern phones. I had a tablet which ran KitKat and all the apps I wanted ran fine, all the games on Google Play were available to me, and in itself, it's a damn good version of Android. Yes, Lollipop and Marshmallow are better. For a start, it has a dedicated power saving mode which, you know, actually works. But there are workarounds for this in KitKat. There are a bunch of power-saving apps out there, so it's worth giving it a try. Not to mention, KitKat isn't supported much anymore by Samsung or HTC, so if you're into this sort of thing, it's easier to root it and have more control over your phone. As for Apple devices, well, iDevices and the Apple Watch are better supported in terms of operating systems. I won't deny that, but this shouldn't be a problem whereas you're buying the phone that has a cycle of obsolescence as long as Android anyway. You buy an iPhone, you buy the brand, you buy into the fact that you know the phone will work 95% of the time. For simpletons, for better use of the word, it's perfect for them. You don't have to worry about the things that go wrong. End of the day though, it's totally up to personal preference. But you know, Android is better. It just is. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. I'll save that for another video. My conclusion for this video is what I basically said at the start. Look at the audience and see what a new feature can improve their lives. A 4K screen is not one of those things. 4K televisions and 4K monitors are not mainstream yet. They are, to some degree, cheap enough to buy now. Honestly, don't see the difference between 4K and 1080p at this point. You have to push them harder before you start pushing 4K accessories like smartphones and tablets. It doesn't work like that. You can't oversaturate that market. Oh, and don't buy into the hype either, dear listener, because you'll be the one footing the bill, not Sony or Samsung. Save yourself some money and buy a smartphone you know will last for a good 2 or 3 years, because the Z5 is a flash pan smartphone, only existing to be sold on its technological achievements that appeal to about 10% of you. Every day, we're all getting a little bit smarter, I hope. And with that, I thank you very much for listening. My hair got in the way of that. That's really annoying. But here is my advice. Not that. Hell, octa-core processors haven't even simply cannot beat the dual-core Intel Pen. This is going to be a hard one to say.